Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for NYCPM's Women in Podiatric Medicine webinar today. My name is Lisa Lee. I'm the Dean for Student Services and Enrollment Management at the college. Most importantly, today we have joining us 3 of our alumni who are extremely accomplished physicians as educators in the profession. Samantha, if we can go to the next slide. And now what I'm going to ask our panelists to do is to introduce themselves. So why don't we kick it off with Dr. Krupa Patel.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me here. My name is Dr. Krupa Patel. I am a New York native, born and raised in Queens. I went to undergrad at NYU and did biochemistry, and then went on to graduate NYCPM in the class of 2008. I currently am the managing partner at a 5-doctor practice in New Jersey, as well as serving on various consultantship roles with different companies throughout the country, and also having a very highly surgical practice. Well, I got married with 2 kids, and they're so cute. Dr. Ross, you're next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Adrienne Ross. I am passionate about these sort of things, so I'll start with that. And I'm from Ohio. Sometimes I don't like to claim it, but I am from Ohio, and I went to school at NYCPM, graduated in the same class as Dr. Patel, 2008. And I currently practice at the Foot and Ankle Institute of Georgia in Conyers, Georgia. I am teaching faculty for Emory School of Medicine. I sit on the residency committee for Emory Podiatric Residency Program. Hold a various amount of roles. I'm the president of the Georgia Podiatric Medical Association right now. And I think surgically, my passion has been that I really enjoy pedicle muscle flaps and a lot of rotational skin flaps. So essentially kind of orthoplastics for the lower extremity. That's kind of my niche as far as surgery. And I own my own practice. And I have 2 little kids that are very, very ambitious little ones. I'll put it that way. That's a good word.
Dr. Presman, if you can unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. So nice to meet everyone here. Thank you for coming. My name is Dr. Presman. I'm also an alumni of NYCPM. I graduated in the class of 2012. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I did my undergraduate training at Baruch College. I then went on to NYCPM and stayed here for my residency. I did my residency training at Mount Sinai, and then stayed here again, to start my career. I went into sort of private practice, I would say, as an associate, working with both just a private practice physician as well as a multi-specialty group, and enjoyed it very much. Then took a little bit of time off to have my second child. I had my first one in residency, and I had my second one. So I guess we're all moms of 2 kids here. I don't know if you have boys or girls, but I have 2 boys. And, after that, took a little bit of time off and ended up doing what I always wanted to do, was go and do a wound care fellowship, which I did, and finished my fellowship, and then was recruited back to NYCPM, where I'm working now. I'm working in the role of the director of radiology. So I went from wound care to now radiology. So, I'm doing a little bit of both worlds, and I really enjoy it. So I teach, I'm the course director of 2 courses, as well as I teach down in the clinic. We do imaging, X-ray, ultrasound, etc. And I teach 3rd year, 4th year, and even 2nd year students throughout the school, and do a number of other things to contribute to the institution.
Thank you, Dr. Presman. Actually, Samantha, if you can just stay with that slide. So thank you. So what we have today, we have some questions prepared for our panelists. And I think these questions can be applied to everyone. all three of our panelists. If you want to initially take turns in all giving your initial personal answers to these questions. Also, we will leave about 10 minutes at the end of the webinar so our participants, our attendees can ask their questions as well. But feel free also to put in your questions throughout this webinar in the chat box or the Q&A box. So that said, why don't we start out with the most basic question. How did you first become interested in the field of podiatric medicine? Who wants to go first? Dr. Patel?
Sure, here I am. It was actually you, Lisa, who dragged me into the school. No, I'm just kidding. When I was at NYU, I was, still debating whether I wanted to go a traditional allopathic or DO versus DPM route. I visited lots of schools, interviewed at lots of different places, both for allopathic and DO programs. And then I went to an open house at NYCPM. Met some podiatrists, but also met Lisa. I, saw the coursework, saw the sort of potential career I would have. And, I really found myself a home after looking around and not being entirely sure what I wanted to do. Once I shadowed podiatrists in my area, actually in Long Island, I saw that there was so much variety and so many different pathologies they were seeing that I wasn't going to get bored. I wasn't going to be writing prescriptions only all day. We're very procedure based. It was just a whole wide range of patients that we get to help with their foot and ankle conditions. So I was pretty much sold, but I think it was you, Lisa. Not gonna lie.
Love you too. You're welcome. That's it. Dr. Ross?
So, I don't want to sound cliche. I have actually quite a similar story. As long as I've known you, Dr. Patel, I didn't realize how similar our stories were. So it's funny. I actually was I did a DO program, and I was about to enroll into it. And one of my friends actually who went to podiatry school later said, hey, you should check out, the school NYCPM. And I'm like, I'm in Ohio. I was like, New York sounds great. And I was like, I don't know that much about podiatry. And so I said, yeah, I'll go take a look at it. And at the time I was actually shadowing and working in an office for about a year when I was in college at a DO's office. And so she was pushing me going towards osteopathic medicine. And that was, I loved it. I did a program, for it. And long story short, I was set to go into either that program or do a post-bac in research at OSU. And the husband of the DO doctor was a podiatrist. And he came in and he looked like he loved his job. And I hate to say this, but the wife, who was a DO, hated her job. And so I said, maybe I'll consider this whole podiatry thing. And so I went to NYCPM. My mother, who is Chinese, for those of you who don't know, saw Lisa and said, oh, this is great. She can help take care of you. And she initially said, oh, this is great. I'll link you up with her. I love this school, and she, when they first met. And then I spent time in the clinic, and it was, I think, kind of love at first sight. I got a chance to speak Spanish. I got a chance to speak my Mandarin. I got a chance to help like hands-on because they were running a little short staff, and they let me actually assist. And that told me that was the most at home I ever felt, and so that was it for me. I canceled everything else and said, I'm going to go to NYCPM.
So I have maybe not as interesting of a story, but I actually wanted to be an attorney for as long as I could remember. Went to Baruch. I was doing finance as well as law. And then I realized that I hated it. When I did an internship at a law office, and I said, oh my God, I can't imagine doing this for the rest of my life. Even though I love the law still, I just couldn't see myself. I just wasn't a good fit for me. It was different than I thought it would be. And so I changed my major in undergrad in my fourth year. So I actually ended up doing an extra year of school because I changed my major and I decided to do pre-med. And so I had to stay, to do a little extra, but the CUNY program was very accommodating and I was able to finish it faster than I had anticipated, but still an extra year. And then was again, just like everyone else, considering, what I wanted to do in medicine. Both of my parents were physicians. And so I considered it, and I never even knew that podiatry existed. I had actually been to a podiatrist. I had always had little issues with my feet growing up that nobody could figure out what was going on. So it took me going to podiatry school to figure out what was wrong with me, but that really wasn't the reason. I had actually been to a podiatrist. I didn't know that podiatry was separate. I thought that it was just a subsection of medical school. You go to medical school and then you specialize, in the foot and ankle. I didn't know about podiatry. And one day I came home and my mom handed me, she's like, here's your mail. And I was still living with my parents at that time. And she hands it to me and I see it's from NYCPM. It's a little mailer about podiatry. And I was like, wait, what is this? I didn't know about this. I start looking into it. I'm like, oh my God, I went to a podiatrist several times, got orthotics and things, and never knew it was a separate field. Looked into it, and we had a family friend who had their own practice, and I went there, shadowed, and again, also just like everyone else, sort of fell in love with it, the diversity and the different pathologies and the people you meet, and just the interesting things that walk through the door every day, every minute are just so unique to the field. And I also love doing the hands-on, and that's how I guess it was also Lisa. If you circle back, I guess it was also Lisa.
I'm probably responsible for sending that postcard to you. It was fate, Dr. Presman. It was all fate. Actually, I'm going to ask a question from one of our attendees. It's actually directed to Dr. Patel and Ross. Do you have any regret about not pursuing the osteopathic path? Dr. Ross?
Adrienne, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I was going to say I don't, and primarily because when you do research into osteopathic medicine, the majority of them, at least back then, went into primary care. So you kind of, if you're interested in medicine, you have to kind of discern whether or not you want to be, kind of more primary care medicine, or you want to be more specialty based and more, either surgical route or something to that effect. And so I realized that the DO that I worked for was a primary care physician, and just the way, just they do a lot of paperwork and they're underpaid in comparison. They didn't seem as happy in comparison to what I saw with podiatry. And I didn't have to go necessarily through so many extra years of training and try to fight to get to what I wanted. I wanted to do foot and ankle. I enjoy small joints, so I have no regrets. I feel like I was saved, because a lot of my DO colleagues now, they love what they do, what I mean? But probably not as much as the way I love what I do.
My turn. Yeah. So, it's a tough question to answer, because when we went to podiatry school, when we started, this was almost 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, I think yeah, Lisa, I know. 20 years ago, the opportunities in the DO space were different, right? If you look now, a lot of DOs are getting the same programs, residencies as MDs are. They're becoming vascular surgeons, they're doing orthopedic surgery, they're doing pretty much anything and everything. So for me, is there regret? No, absolutely not. But that's mostly because I don't want to be a commodity, right? Like a lot of my MD-DO colleagues, they work for a hospital system. They, don't own their own businesses. So a lot of this, what I'm doing, owning a business, running my practice the way I want to run it, staying true to my mission, those things I don't think I would have gotten had I gone a traditional MD-DO route. A lot of the issues that DOs face are the same ones that we face and the same ones that MDs face. So I don't really regret anything. I think I absolutely love what I do. I think the amount of satisfaction you get from a patient walking in, limping and walking out, like, you're the first one who listened to me, you're the first one who actually believed what I was saying, or, even being able to save somebody's leg when, they've been to their MD-DO. So I don't have any regrets. I think I'm exactly where I need to be at this point in my career.
We have a couple of questions that's really relevant to the things that we're discussing. I'm going to go with the more basic question and then go to more larger philosophical question. But first, I think you've already covered it, but what are your favorite parts of being a doctor of podiatric medicine? Dr. Presman, do you want to start there?
Sure. I guess it's hard to pick a single thing. I really enjoy the diversity I enjoy that you really can do, even though podiatry is already specialized, so it's foot and ankle, right? Can you get more specialized? Yes, you can, because you can do diabetic care, you can do wound care, like, which I love wound care. I love imaging, the foot and ankle, that's another niche, right? So you could do surgery, you could do big joint surgery like ankle joints, you could do small joints like in all the scheme of things, maybe the ankle is not the biggest joint, right? But for our from our perspective, you can do forefoot, you could do rear foot surgery, you could do soft tissue surgery only. There's so many different things. You might not do surgery at all. You might do biomechanics or sports medicine. I just like that there's so many different ways that you can go about being true to who you are and following what you are interested in and loving what you do every day. And you don't have to change specialties to do it. You just have to, pursue your interests, and there's just so much to do. And as someone who is kind of eclectic and likes doing different things and enjoys that, that's, I guess, my favorite part.
Thank you. Dr. Ross?
It's my favorite part. So I am an entrepreneur at heart. So I love the idea with podiatry that it's a small enough profession that, so I have a consulting business on the side, a couple of them actually, but one of them is I do a lot of defense work, or a decent amount. So I'll do med mal cases, or I'll do audits or whatnot. And because podiatry is, smaller, foot and ankle, there's only so many experts that they can ask for. And these cases are coming up more and more now, especially post-pandemic, because people are trying to be more active. And so it's a smaller population of experts, so that it really does. I mean, I think a lot of times we could ask questions as, even within the field, how do we feel limited? But it's because we haven't really had as many panels like this to talk about how we've been innovative within our own field, because we've never really been, pushed to kind of think that way out of the box. So for me, innovation looked like, I want to train and do more plastic. So I do a lot of plastic surgical procedures, and, to be able to show that to other specialties it's mind blowing to them, because they didn't know us that way. So I think this is one profession where we actually get a chance to really kind of pave the way and advocate for the patients that are coming to us. So I really do like that part of it.
Hal?
My most favorite thing you said?
Or any, what do you enjoy about the practice?
I enjoy a lot of things. And, there's someone who asked about what's my least favorite thing, because let's be real, not everything's all roses and fields of green here. I absolutely love the variety of patients that I see. So I can see a 3-week-old, I can see a 103-year-old all in the same day. So I don't get bored. I don't, I think there's definitely areas where you can be niche in your field, like Dr. Presman, or like Dr. Ross, in different consulting things. But even sticking with the path of just podiatry, right? In my practice, which is very surgical. We see a lot of trauma. We see a lot of reconstructive stuff. We do ankle work, total ankle replacements. There's so much going on inside our field that you're never going to be bored. There's if you're prepared and trained well and confident, you're going to get the consults. People are going to look to you as the expert in your area, and you will be busy. So that, people have 2 feet and they need them to walk and function. And I tell you that it has kept our doors open. I want to answer Cassidy Begley's least favorite thing about podiatry question, because let's be real here, ladies, everything is not as great as it seems. I think my least favorite thing would be insurance companies. Working in this, having to see more and get paid less. But I think that's not a podiatry isolated thing. Another least favorite would be having to, explain what we do. Because although there's been so much improvement in the last 20 years since I started podiatry school, there's still, a certain echelon of the population who has no idea that podiatrists exist, or that we, do surgery. And instead of having like a chip on my shoulder about it, I'm just happy to educate, or I let my work speak for me. So I don't know how you feel about that, Dr. Presman or Dr. Ross, but what are your least favorite things?
Dr. Pressman, I'll let you go.
So I would have to second insurance companies. That is one thing but I think that's every, and anyone who works outside maybe of a hospital system where they don't really worry about that. But even still, nonetheless, it always comes back to you in some way, because even if the hospital does the billing for you and you're not dealing directly with insurance companies, your salary, comes from the insurance billing and that kind of thing and workload. And it always still comes back to insurance companies, or patients come in and go, well, and you say, well, you need this. And they go, well, my insurance doesn't cover that. Right. So at the end of the day, the insurance companies, they really ruin everything for everybody, to some degree. As providers, they're great when you're a patient. Hopefully they cover what you need, but they do kind of get in the way. But we, as just a profession in general, I think everyone in medicine learns to deal with it, and it's just part of the game. And, you sort of learn to play their game and that kind of thing. Otherwise, there's, just like with any profession, I think there's some, regulatory things, like even if it's not necessarily insurance companies, you want to get on staff at a hospital, you have to jump through hoops. There's paperwork, there's constant, endless paperwork, there's CAQH paperwork, there's constant credentialing, there's the paperwork. So there's a lot to, there's just, you have to really be good at managing your time and record keeping and organizing, and that makes your life a lot easier, especially when you guys are in private practice. It adds to the amount of paperwork. So I think just paperwork in general, there's a lot of paperwork, but perhaps maybe not as other specialties, but I think nobody can get away from the paperwork.
Dr. Ross?
Yeah, I'll say, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have said insurances, but one of the companies I have, we go up and fight against insurance companies, and we advocate for doctors. And, so I have a very, I have an inside look on the whole thing with insurance and billing, and which is most people's kind of, issues. And, I do a lot of billing and coding reviews or whatnot. So that part doesn't bother me. It's probably just toe surgery. I don't like toes. I don't know what it is. I was like, I prefer ankles. I prefer hind foot. I was like, but like hammer toes, they seem to be like the most like picky patients. I'll do them, but for whatever reason, like I'll take nail care over, just regular toe surgery sometimes.
On that note, why don't I take another question from one of our attendees? This is a common question. Wondering what difficulties podiatrists have between podiatry and orthopedic surgery. Do podiatric physicians work alongside orthopedic physicians?
Let me go first. Let me go first.
Whoever wants to take it.
I'll take it. So,
Go for it.
It's, again, 20 years, things have changed. I think we are being trained at such a higher level and intensity, particularly in our surgical programs and fellowships, that orthopedic practices are just hiring podiatrists to join their groups. It happens across the country. It's happening. Some of our previous residents at the program that I work with have joined orthopedic groups. It's becoming to the point where podiatry is actually becoming a actual visible threat to orthopedists, to where they've had to actually talk about, how great they are and how not great we are. But I think it's a matter of the public really understanding the qualifications and the amount of work and training that we actually do. I think that person had the question about, is there a difficulty with podiatry and orthopedic in a hospital setting? Yeah, sometimes there is, absolutely. But there's going to be difficulties in any field you go into. Cardiac, endovascular cardiologists are going to be annoyed with a vascular surgeon, or a vascular surgeon is going to be fighting with an interventional, right? We have this in every aspect of medicine. It happens everywhere, right? I think if we focus more on just becoming better physicians who are listening to their patients, you'll win. Like, we're going to win. It's not a competition, but at the end of the day, 20 years later, I think our level as part of the medical field and the healthcare microcosm has increased, right? So we are integral to the care of our diabetic patients. We're integral to our vasculopaths, and everyone knows it at this point. Because I don't see an ortho coming in to do an amp or a gas gangrene case. So I don't know about you, Adrienne, but
So it's funny you mentioned that. So I had a ortho spine surgeon that was on call and for one of the hospitals that I go to, and he sends me a message and says, "Hey, I got a bad infection case going on and I haven't touched the foot in forever." And I'm thinking probably shouldn't. And he said, "Hey," I said, "Do you want me to take it?" And he said, "Do you mind if I come in with you?" And I was trying to figure out, why do you want to come in on this case? And I said, "Yeah, sure. Come on in with me." So we did the case together. And afterwards he says, "Hey, I didn't know that I just didn't think that you guys would be that efficient." And I was like, "Well, you don't really hang out with us, right?" And it was such a great relationship. And to Dr. Patel's point, it's really all about perception. So even if you go into an area that historically had a bad relationship between ortho and podiatry, you'd be the one that changed that. So for instance, I'll just give you a couple of ways to practically change that. And this is what I tell my residents. For one, publish with ortho or plastics or vascular when you get out there. When I ended up publishing on, frames, I specifically put one of the top ortho trauma docs that I trained with on it, so that when they questioned my certifications at the hospital and whether I wanted a TAR certification, they were pushing back on it, the chair of ortho. I said, "Hey, take a look at the papers that I've published. By definition, I'm an expert in the field, and one of your colleagues endorsed me." And then they approved it. They didn't even think twice. So I think the strength in that comes from podiatrists coming out and saying, "Hey, I want to be a part of the fabric and the network of medicine," rather than being kind of solo kind of gunners on their own, and that's where things change. And it's changed a lot, to be honest.
We're getting so many questions in the Q&A, so I want to try to cover as much as possible. That said, one of the questions I know is looming on all students as well as prospective students is, what does a job outlook like? Do you think it's hard to get a good job at a hospital, or do you need to own your own practice?
So I think that it it depends on, I think some of the, I don't think it's hard. There are always challenges, just like with any field, jobs are always a challenge, I think from the standpoint of figuring out what you want to do, where you want to work, and exactly what kind of career you want to have. I think that's where it starts. Once you understand yourself and what your interests are and what you want to contribute to the field and what you want to bring to it, but also what you want to earn, right? What kind of living you want to have with respect to your time, with respect to your reimbursement. I think some of that is not accepting below what you think you deserve. There's going to be situations where people will lowball you. People will offer you less benefits than maybe someone else, or in a different field. Let's say foot and ankle, there's a little bit of a disparity, from podiatry to foot and ankle, but there's a way to break through those barriers. And part of that is showing what you can bring, and then making people see it, value it, and then sort of demanding it, to some degree, and not accepting. And then if you can't get it, you can start your own practice. There are many ways to build upon your, let's say you do have a practice, right? You, just like the other panelists here, you can have a consulting company. There are always different ways that you can augment your salary. Even if you do work for someone, and let's say you don't want to start your practice for whatever reason, there are many different ways to, within this field, market yourself and augment your salary. I think that there might be barriers in certain parts of the country more than others, but there's definitely a way around it. And there's definitely a way to make a very good living in this field.
Thank you, Dr. Presman. Dr. Ross or Dr. Patel, do you have anything to add in regards to the job prospect, career prospect for podiatric physicians?
Yeah, I'll jump in. And so it really does come down to, what are you looking for? So when I talk to my medical students or the residents, I usually give them a list of maybe 7 variables and say, rank what's most important to you: autonomy, salary, location, whatever, and you figure out what are your priorities first. For me, autonomy was really, really high up there, and it's like, there's a lot of misnomers out there. There's a lot of fallacies, and I knew from certain people that were mentoring me that going into private practice, I could do very well, and I also got my autonomy. So that was the main reason why I went that direction. And there's a couple of ways you can do it so that you get paid just as much as you would if you were in a bigger group, depending on what region you're in. So I would say that the ultimate goal is figuring out what your priorities are, what you want, and then you determine, okay, how much do you want to work? How much do you want to make? And then you tailor everything around that. So for me, I mean, I have, in addition to my practice, maybe 3 companies, and it works for me. And I don't do it necessarily for just the money. I do it because I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. So that's the short answer of that is figure out what you want first and what are your priorities, and then the money and everything else will come.
Dr. Patel?
I think the ladies hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's definitely there's always going to be a job. There's always going to be a job in healthcare, in a hospital system. I don't think you have to dogmatically do one or the other. I think if you want to open a practice, you can, but know that it's going to be a heavy lift, right? Adrienne, Dr. Ross mentioned mentorship and certain people who have helped her throughout her career. I think that's a huge thing, right? Developing a mentorship or some sort of relationship with someone who's already in practice, be it you're attending when you're a resident, be it someone who is in your neighborhood or whatever. But more important than mentorship for me is actually sponsorship. And there's a key differential in that. You can mentor me, but if you're not going to vouch for me or help me get on staff with a hospital, then it really doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how much we talk, because it doesn't actually, there's no actual value to that, right? Except for learning. So I really look for sponsorship in people and people in our field, because that really helps you figure out what you want to do. I know it sounds ominous, right? Like when you come out of podiatry school and you're like, what do I want to do? You have no idea what you want to do, right? That's why residency becomes so important. I know there's a couple of questions about residency training and like, what do we do? Well, residency is where you learn pretty much everything you're going to learn, surgically, clinically, and hopefully, on a practice management side. And that's really where you want to focus. Like that is probably the time you want to spend most doing what you want. So if you like surgery, you did great in Dr. Jules's class and you want to be in that lane, then you pick a program that's going to be highly surgical, right? And there's programs all over the country that every program is surgical to some degree, but there's some that do different types of procedures more than others. Or you think about fellowship, from day one, and you go kind of down that route, right? If you don't want to do that, then there's other ways around it, right? But I don't know if you'll have all the answers right in the beginning, but know that you have a community of people with your NYCPM alumni, with, the women on this panel. Lisa has a Rolodex of people she will call if you ever need anything or want to just talk things through. But I wouldn't even worry about job market at this point, because, someone asked about salaries, you're going to do well. You're going to do well.
I was going to ask you to touch upon salaries, but I guess we can go over that now. So when I guess this kind of goes with some of the things we've been talking about. Can you talk about your work-life balance?
So
Who wants to go first?
Sure. So the question is, what is work-life balance? So I think work-life balance is unique to each person. It really depends on, what kind of work-life balance suits you as an individual best. Some people, like I, for instance, work 4 days a week. Some people work 6 days a week. It really depends on, do you have children at home? Do you have supporting family members? Do you have anyone that you are also responsible for helping? It really depends. It's very unique, but I think that no matter what your situation is, that I think in podiatry, it's possible to make it work, because I know plenty of moms who work part-time. I know plenty of people who work full-time and maybe their spouse stays home with the kids, or they both work full-time. They have a live-in nanny, like I had when I was in residency, because I had my first son when I was in residency. So as a first year, so I had a live-in nanny for a couple of years. There is a way to make it work. And I think podiatry is flexible, because if you want to be on staff at a hospital and take call, you could do that. If you can't, or you don't want to, you can work in the office and as a 9 to 5, an 8 to 4, and whatever kind of situation fits you best. there is a way to make it work. And I really believe that, because if I just look around and think about my friends and what they do, everybody figures out a way to make their life work around their job. They make it work.
So I didn't have children until I didn't get married until after fellowship. So I think that's one of the questions. I'm a little biased. I do recommend fellowships for specific people, depending on what you want. But I would say, I don't know if I would call it work-life balance. I think it's more realistically like work-life juggling. You know what I mean? It's kind of an osmosis. You know, some days you're going to be more here because you can't wear all hats equally. You really can't. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, I'm a business owner, I'm a chair of my department, I'm a president, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, you know, so some days I'll wear one hat more than another. And, you know, for me, it's, you know, I have diagrams for that help me, you know, and certain days dedicated to other things. But, you know, mom, you have to wear it all the way through. So I would say that, you know, if you come up with your own system, you know, and it gets back to priorities, you know, and I do everything on a 1, 4, 1, 5, 10, 15 year kind of timeline for the big picture. You know, I would say that helps. That really does help, because you have to kind of have a direction as which way you're going to be going. So my balancing, or my, you know, however we want to call that, is very much geared towards my priority in this timeline, in this phase. You know, so I hope that answers the question. And then that last part, someone asked about how difficult is it to manage a family, you know, even in private practice? Because I feel like you're almost busier in private practice than you are even in fellowship and in residency. There is no job that rivals that of motherhood. I will tell you, no matter how much call, no matter what you do, there is nothing that rivals motherhood, truly. But it is the most life-giving job that you'll ever have. So it's a gift unto itself. But with that said, you know, you just have to be prepared that you have your support system. So I used to be ashamed of saying that, yeah, I've got 2 nannies, and, you know, I've got somebody who's a cleaning crew. And it's like, at this point right now, you figure out who's your support team. I've got a strategist, a consultant, and 2 attorneys that are on call for me, you know, so it makes it work. So just who's your team?
My turn. Work-life balance. So like Adrienne, I don't like to call it work-life balance because, one, I feel like that question is only asked to women. I don't think my husband's ever gotten a question about his work-life balance. So that's one. Number 2, I actually like to call it work-life integration, because my work doesn't stop and my home life doesn't stop and my kids are never going to stop. When I go home, I make priorities, just like Adrienne. I may not be organized. I probably don't have diagrams. But I do make sure that when I'm home, I'm 100% present with my children. They're 5 and 8. They need a lot of attention and they love their mom, as they should. And they're boys. So Dr. Presman, #boymom. So with that being said, I also am the managing partner of this practice. So there are things that happen all day, every day, middle of the night, you know, first thing in the morning. So I think moving those hats around quickly is important. But one of the bigger things I think we always forget as women is you don't have to be all things to all people, and to forgive yourself a little bit, like give yourself a little bit of leeway that if you do drop the ball, okay, so what? I mean, don't leave your kid at school, but like, you know, if you drop the ball, something in your practice or something happens, or you forget to, you know, you don't finish your notes. It is what it is, right? This is a tiny piece of your entire life. And forgive yourself, right? Because we spend a lot of time being hard on ourselves. And that's where we get all these like imposter syndrome things, like I'm not good enough because I can't do X, Y, Z. You are, right? Thankfully, I can proudly say I have no nannies and I'm not embarrassed about it. I don't have a cleaning crew. My house looks like a tornado hit it. I have a husband who works from home and is wonderful with our boys. That's it. I have a partner who partners. That's it. And there's no question about it. He does the dishes, he does the laundry because he's in the house, right? Versus me, if I'm lecturing, I'm traveling, I'm on a plane, you know, we make it work. But again, you have to find that whatever's right for you in your situation, but think less about balance, more about integration, because I think it's a lot more forgiving than trying to be all things.
Thank you for that, Dr. Patel.
You feel inspired, Lisa?
Totally. You always inspire me. You know that's why I keep you around.
Yes, I know.
Another question is about the future. How would you like the field community of podiatric medicine to evolve, improve in the future? Where do you see podiatric medicine going, or where would you like to see podiatric medicine going?
So maybe I'll take that one. So I think there's always room for improvement in any field. I think collectively as podiatrists, not just women podiatrists, but I think collectively we would like to be recognized, more for what we have, how far we've come, what we contribute to this field, to like, let's say diabetic care, how important we are. And I think on a world stage, and it sometimes goes a little bit under appreciated in terms of, I think, how much podiatrists contribute to. There's just so many things, surgery being one of them, diabetic care, wound care, etc., that I would hope that one day we, patients don't have to ask, what is a podiatrist? What is that? How is that different from a foot and ankle surgeon? I hope that one day that that is understood and known, and that we, there's parity, which I guess is a little bit cliche because everyone talks about parity and what is parity, but I think that just so that we one day feel as though we have succeeded, and we feel that that success is recognized, and we don't have to prove ourselves or go above and beyond just to feel like we are, in that kind of setting on par, I guess I would say.
Anyone else?
Where do I see us going? How do we evolve?
Yeah.
I think we evolve by being deliberate and intentional about getting more women into leadership positions in our field, getting more women on a podium, because I think our experiences are very unique and meaningful. I think that podiatry, it really depends on kind of where you are and what you're doing, but I never feel less than. I am very comfortable having conversations with my MDDO colleagues. I've operated with a surgical oncologist who takes out a lymph node while I amputate a toe at the same time. I have no problem with that. And it might just be where we are and kind of our longevity in this area. I think for me, it's more of a holistic change within our profession. And, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something I am super passionate about. I talk about all the time, and I've talked about it to many different people at many different levels in our field. And I think that is really where we should really have a big change or evolution. I think 55% of all students in podiatry are women, and we should make a little bit of noise. Adrienne, I know you agree, so.
I agree. I'm trying to think of what can I do to add to this? I echo that. Yeah, Krupa and I are literally on the exact same page there. I would say the only thing I would add is I would love to see more diversity of experiences, diversity in every aspect, but also in the way that we view ourselves and what we can do and how creative we are in the field. And what I mean by that is saying that, hey, I want to niche myself into this particular specialty, or I want to learn this particular skill set, and so for the future of podiatry for women, I feel like there really is no ceiling, and I've never felt like, and I can say this, and I respect my male colleagues, but I've never felt like I had to compete against them. If anything, I felt like going into a room that if anybody felt like they had to compete, they'll have to try to feel like they're competing with me, because I'm going to raise the bar, and that's what we're geared to do, and so I would say it's fun, it's fascinating. I enjoy when people underestimate me as a woman, or as whatever, as a foot and ankle or as a podiatrist. So I think that in the field of podiatry, I would love to see just the mindset of that change, go into it and say, okay, I'm ready to go and get everything out of it that I can.
And I think you've covered a lot of the answers for these questions, but I just want to make sure to cover the questions of our attendees. Do you think podiatric medicine is a male-dominated field? Do you feel like you faced any particular challenges because of your gender? And because of your gender, did you have to deal with any pushback or doubt in the workplace? Anyone feel free to cover?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think we all have experienced some level of doubt, mistreatment. I've had people who I was interviewing for jobs with say to me they'd hire me if I was sterile. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's real. It happens. Samantha's like biting nails right now because she's like, oh my God. It's a time where, change is happening and it's inevitable. So I think once if you're on this webinar and you're a student or you're considering podiatry, don't worry, we're going to be changing the path forward that you guys probably won't have to deal with this, but I would get contracts that had no maternity leave in them. And my previous partners would say, well, you're not pregnant. I'm like, yeah, not now, but eventually, right? We want to be prepared for that. So there's always this little microaggressions that happen. I mean, we have the same issues with patients, some patients who don't want to see the brown doctor or the female doctor, or, ask me if I'm the nurse, or nurses to this day at the hospital I'm at staff at who'll say, oh, where's your attending? And I'm like, you didn't get the memo? Like, you don't know who I am, and it happens all the time, right? So a lot of that is sort of I think what we are trying to change. I think that's why I push for the advocacy of women in our field. Is it male dominated? Yes, but they're going to retire. They're about to be out of here. So at this point, let's be real about numbers. I really think that women in our field are going to be taking a stand and taking more leadership positions, and being much more visible. So it's not so strange to see the same people over and over, the same demographic, and no people of color and no other underrepresented groups on stages and presenting and speaking. I think that's all going to change.
Can we go on to the next question, or do you have anything to add, Dr. Ross, Dr. Presman? You're good? Okay, can you repeat that answer? So any advice that you would give to your younger self when you were starting out in this career?
Yes. I would say, don't take yourself so seriously. So I think I was gunning it. I ended up coming out of NYCPM. I went to West Penn for residency, and then I did a fellowship at Louisville, Jewish, in Kentucky, and was just gunning it every step of the way, and was not as gracious to myself. I'll put it that way. Took things a lot harder, and that really to this day now, I don't even think about. So I would tell my younger self, don't take yourself so seriously, be gracious, and just keep moving.
I would definitely agree with that. I think we do, depending on your personality, you want to achieve and overachieve, and every little failure is your worst critic, and people don't see it that way. A lot of things that we perceive are we internalize, the world may not see, and so we have to step back, like Dr. Ross said, and evaluate how big of a impact is this going to make on the rest of my life. And sometimes you just have to let things go and just keep moving, and don't let those things hold you back. So you got one bad grade on an exam, or you had a bad day, or some attending said something to you that you didn't appreciate. Just move forward. There are better days ahead, and there's going to be a whole life ahead that you won't even remember these little things along the way at all. So.
And I know this is a very important theme right now, wellness, mental well-being. How did you handle work-life balance and burnout in different parts of your career?
I think you handle it sort of as it comes, right? I think when you're a student, there's different levels of burnout, right? You're studying, you're reading, you're taking exams every week. When you're a resident, you are awake a lot. You're on call, you're running to the hospital, you have 15 different things that you're sort of juggling at the same time. And then when you're in real life, you have a practice, you have employees, you have employee issues, you have everything else, and then you have patients, and then you have to do their notes, and then you have to worry about malpractice. And, as far as burnout is concerned, I think it is a massive problem in medicine and healthcare, and I think it's the insurance company's fault for making our job that much harder. I think a lot of it is really setting up systems to make your life a little bit easier, if that is getting a scribe, having, people who work with you, who you actually enjoy spending time with, trying to just kind of recenter yourself to see what's really important. And for me, that's like putting my phone down and talking to my kids and hanging out with them, or, going out and having dinner with a friend and having a drink or 8. But there's different ways of coping with burnout. It's inevitable. Healthcare is not for the weary. It's not something you can do without having a thick skin. I don't know about you guys, but what have you done? I think COVID really contributed a lot to burnout as well, particularly in private practice and up here in the East Coast, because it was very jarring up here. So I don't know about you, Adrienne.
Yeah, I would say that, when I talk to a lot of physicians about burnout and just even in my own experiences when I was kind of feeling weighed down, it really, a lot of times it comes down to, you're doing a lot of work, you want to get paid for it. You know what I mean? So insurance companies, it, comes to that kind of tension between, okay, did you, are you getting reimbursed for what you're doing? Do you feel like, what's your return on investment essentially? You know what I mean? So what I've done to kind of shift that is, I do, podiatry, I teach with the residents. I do a couple of different things. So not all of my eggs are in one basket, and then I create multiple streams of income as well. So that if something goes down, then I don't have to panic, but that happened because, I was in a practice before. And I think some of you know my story that, that was being audited. So that one situation taught me, okay, I need to make sure that I have a couple of things going, just to make sure that I can sleep well at night and not worry as much, so I think a lot of it's tied to that. But there's a good, so Luke Ciccinelli sits on the board with Dr. Patel and I with PICA, and he gives a really good couple of podcasts on, avoiding burnout and physician wellness. And he's really, really good about that. So that would be somebody to research.
In terms of our prospective students, question is, any recommendations on how best to prepare for podiatry school, residency, and profession in general?
So I think to prepare is to really, so first, it's just, this is a question for someone starting school, right, Lisa?
This is someone that is assuming starting school or considering podiatric medicine, yes.
So I think if you're going to go into the field of medicine in general, whether it's podiatry or DO or anything, you have to prepare yourself mentally. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of studying. It's a lot of managing your time. And so I think preparing yourself mentally for that. The other thing is setting up a support system around you, because you can't be at the same time, while school is super important and residency and everything, you've got to have those outlets. You've got to have a hobby. You've got to have people that you see, that you rely on, things outside of school, even if it's for an hour a week or something. There's got to be something you look forward to, something outside of school that keeps you grounded, that keeps you in a good place, even when you're stressed out. So I think those things are really important. And also, if you're preparing to go into this field, I think beginning to think about and learn time management skills so that you don't become overworked. Like you don't burn out in the process, because a lot of us don't know how to manage those things. They all come at you fast. And if you don't know how to manage them and you're not prepared and you haven't thought it through, you don't know how to manage your time, it's really going to be, an uphill battle. It's going to be a struggle. So I think preparing that, figuring out what kind of person am I? How do I study best? Am I going to study in groups? Am I going to study in spurts, like an entire Saturday, or I'm going to study an hour a week? How, just starting to think. At least things will change, obviously, once you start school and residency, and you will improvise on the go. But it's nice to have that and start thinking about it and planning, what are strategies for studying, and then what are strategies for relaxing, because you have to have that, juggle, I guess, instead of balance, but it has to be there.
Thank you, Dr. Pressman. Any other sound advice for future podiatric medical students?
Yeah, I mean, I would add that mentorship, we talked about it earlier, is probably the single-handedly most important thing you'll ever get. And I'll ping on a couple of the questions that were asked in there. There was a question about, what are some of the different rotations in residency, and you'll do everything from vascular to ortho, plastics, general medicine. Each one of those different rotations, you should be picking up mentors. So all of your mentors shouldn't just be podiatric surgeons and physicians. I will tell you that I think I'm only where I am today because I've had really amazing mentors all the way from NYCPM to West Penn to fellowship to even now. And they've guided me along the way, and I collect them. I just put them in my pocket and keep going. And so I would say that single-handedly, mentorship is what you need.
How
Yes, ma'am.
advice for the next generation of DPMs?
So my big advice, I think, is if you're entering as a student, like just really study and study hard, right? Some of it seems mundane or repetitive, but one of the things I've learned over the last 20 years is the time I spent at NYCPM learning, studying. I still remember the days when I was working with my study, group, and what we talked about. And I can reflect and bring those things back now, because despite being just podiatrists, we see people who have actual bodies that have other illnesses, right? So recollecting all that information that you learned back in first and second year, third year, fourth year, is going to be huge, because you are the one who's going to figure out, like, hey, I remember learning this, should we order additional blood work, or should I talk to the primary about ordering additional blood work? Or do they have some rheumatologists on board? Is there something else going on? Because some of the things we see in the foot are not just foot related, orthopedic conditions. It's not all going to be a bunion and a hammer toe. So in school, I think the best bet is just really try to study as much as you can, learn, spend time in the clinics, see as many patients as you can, and get the most out of your education, but also get the most out of being in that area, right? There are certain pathologies that you'll only see at New York. There's a question, I think, about why New York? Well, I mean, it's the best city in the world, number one. Number two, it has also the best pathology in the world. The diversity of the population, the people, the age, immigrants who come to New York, you just see a wide variety of things that you may never see again, but you want to be prepared just in case you do. I practice in the suburbs in New Jersey, and I still have people who come from everywhere because they know that we can figure out what's going on. And a lot of that is New York, right? I mean, the pathology is unmatched, and the volume in the clinic is unmatched. And that stuff is really important, I think that's about it. Did I feel better equipped in residency? Someone asked. I mean, yes, I did. I think residency is its own beast, where you're going to learn a lot, and it's really going to be about what you put into it. If you're going to be a stealth resident who tries to go home at 2:00, that's going to be on you, right? That's your training. I was the resident who took a lot of call, and I had the black cloud that followed me like the plague. So I would get trauma call on holidays. I'd miss Christmas and Thanksgiving in the same year. But that's what it was, right? And again, the advice I'd give myself is, that was just a microcosm. That was a little moment in time. That was a little fragment of where my career has gone. And I'm all the better for it.
Dr. Ross, do you want to cover, since this is about NYCPM somewhat, can you also cover that question, please?
So in the sense that,
Let me read the question. Do you have personal viewpoints on the benefits and advantages of attending NYCPM versus another podiatry school? Do you feel better equipped in residency programs, fellowships compared to your colleagues due to NYCPM's program and support system?
yeah, so what I appreciated about NYCPM was, my personality was I wanted to go to a program that would trust me, almost kind of like the difference between high school and college. High school, someone's going to be there constantly standing over you, micromanaging you, and almost not trusting that you really want to be there. In college, it says, I'm giving you the information and you can choose, to study, to learn, to push yourself. And so NYCPM has all of the resources there, but I felt like I had more mentors around me in NYCPM that were saying, if you want this, go for it. And people practically, whether it was, Dr. Cohen at the time for Department of Radiology, he spent nearly 3 days prepping me for residency interviews, or if it was Dr. Jules still advocating, for me, or, Dr. Ross at one point, had told me, I think West Penn would be a really good place for you to go, so I think at NYCPM, it was home to me because I found people who took me under their wing and genuinely said, hey, your future matters. And I'm not just saying that because it sounds warm and fuzzy, but genuinely it really did, or I wouldn't have been there. And it's NYCPM, I think a lot of times people don't realize like how well trained we are, particularly in the clinic, like hands-on, because we have so much clinical exposure, especially in comparison to a lot of schools. So when you get to a program, what's second nature to us, because we've seen it, is not secondary to them because they've only read about it in a textbook. And to Dr. Patel's point, the diversity of pathology that you see, you'll see a clubfoot or whatnot, is you're not going to see it in a lot of other school clinics. You just won't.
Dr. Presman?
So, I think they touched on comparing their own experiences. What I'll touch on, I guess, is the feedback that I get from our current students, let's say our fourth year students that go out on those externships and then return back. They go out as third years, at the end of their third year, and then return back, so midway through their fourth year, after completing their externships, after, taking the boards and, speaking to them about their experiences. What I have for the past, I haven't really been at the school for that long, since my third year, is that when they go out, especially to other parts of the country, that attendings there can tell based on working with them in the clinic and speaking to them and working with them in the OR, what school they're from before they even tell them what school they're from. Because and not to say that, we're the best school, I don't have personal experience with the other schools, so I can't compare and I can't say anything negative. All I'm giving is just, what I've heard from other students is that came back is that due to the fact that you see so much diversity and so many patients just as in terms of volume, it really prepares you because you get so much hands-on experience. There's a constant push at NYCPM each year to make it better and better and to improvise and to bring in new technology and to more, reviews, more cases, more just pushing and upping the game of how we deliver the information, not just giving more information, but delivering it in a way that will make it stick and giving students those hands-on experiences, not just in the clinic, but just in, like, for example, in imaging in my department, doing case reviews and MRIs and CTs, advancing, the field. I think that students feel when they are out there, they are above the expectations of their attendings that they're working with, that they are surpassing expectations. They're being told, wow, that you are really, you're shining, you're doing an amazing job. And they can see it when they discuss when they say, hey, read this image, or how would you approach this case surgically or in terms of, post-op care. They feel prepared and others around them can see that they're prepared.
Yeah, that is something we do hear often. Thank you, Dr. Pressman. I see already we have hit the hour, so I'm just going to end with a risky, but I think a fun question. From an anonymous attendee, they ask, would you recommend this field to your children? Dr. Patel?
I would love to, but I won't because my older son is going to play for the Yankees and my younger son is going to dance on Broadway. So no. Actually, let's be honest, right? I think I don't know if I would recommend healthcare in general. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think with the amount of technology and the amount of jobs and other fields where you can make a difference and an impact, that I don't know if healthcare and medicine is the way for my children. If they absolutely say, like, I want to do this, I would support them. But again, I'm just waiting for season tickets for the Yankees because my 8-year-old is going to be a lefty pitcher. So full disclosure.
Dr. Ross?
And I will tell you with the way that medicine is now and what you can do with it, I would say, because my son, I mean, he's come to work with me, and he's asked a lot of, I mean, he's 6 and he's asked a lot of questions. And so he'll say, he announced to his class, my mommy cuts people. And I'm like, let's rephrase that. That might sound kind of bad. Let's rephrase it. And when I explain to him what I do, why I do what I do, and he really, really likes that aspect of it. He really does. So we usually, so for instance, even like with birthdays, I tell him, I said, do you want an experience or do you want gifts? You don't get both, and I said, that's kind of how it is in life. Are you going to go for the toys or do you want an experience? And he always chooses experience, so the way that I've told him is like, medicine will give you a great experience. You know what I mean? It comes with its ups and its downs, just like any profession. If you go into it thinking any profession that it's all going to be roses, then you're wrong. But you have a choice that you can kind of reinvent yourself in many different ways. And I tell him that's why mommy likes her job, because I've reinvented myself and I've used medicine as a really, really good stepping stool for me to be able to do what I really, really love, which is to wear different hats. So yes.
That's a yes, you would recommend it.
Yes, that's a yes. Sorry, a long yes.
Dr. Pressman?
So I don't know about recommend. So the reason why I say that, not because of just not our field, but just in general, I think that your profession has to suit you, right? So I think that just like I love what I do, I think there are many very honorable and valuable professions, and it has to match what you want out of your life. So if you're going into medicine to make money, I think there are easier ways to go about it and faster, right? We go through so much school, so much heartache, so much stress and anxiety, and just pushing yourself to the max. And I'm sure other fields are similar, sleepless nights and weekends and everything, but it has to all, culminate into something. So if you love to take care of people and interact with people and help them get better, and that is just your passion, then absolutely. But if you're doing it like, hey, this might be a good way to make money, it's not. There are other ways, not that you can't make money, but this is not for people who just want to make money. You have to love it, because if you're in it to make money, one, there's an easier way, I think, to make money. And also that'll be to the detriment of your patients, because in order to be a good doctor, you have to have a love for people and a love to, improve their health and wellness and to see people thrive. And if that's just not your personality, and you enjoy finances more, and you're, or just kind of being on your own and working independently, like, you have to work with people. You can, in this field. So I think that if that is the passion of my kids and they really follow in my footsteps, I would be absolutely happy and ecstatic about it. And if they chose another profession that made them happy, I would be equally happy for them.
On that note, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for your time. For our attendees, we didn't get to everyone's question, but feel free to email us. We have Dr. Patel Ross Pressman's contact. I hope they're giving me the okay to share their contacts with our attendees for sponsorship, for mentorship, for all of the above. And really thank you to our panelists for giving of your time. I know you're all very busy. So I'm very grateful. That said, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you all soon, Drs. Patel, Ross, and Presman.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.